So your character isn't really a talky sort, but you need to do some important exposition. You need to establish a history between two characters, but you don't want to take too long about it. Maybe hint at some stuff going on under the surface, but very subtly. You want to set up your initial bookend, which you'll call back to at the end of the movie. Maybe you just want to give the people who are only here for the explosion something to look at right at the start of your movie. Well, in that case.
Wanna fight?
Oh heck yes. By which I mean it's a very efficient way to establish links between characters without seeming to slow the pace down too much. And on closer inspection it can be a clue to the real nature of their relationships. My name is Jill Bearup and my interest, even during these times when I have to attend classes on Zoom and try not to knock over my tripod with my eskrima sticks, is stage combat, which is to say the art of pretending to fight for screen or stage without actually hurting people. Important point. Which is obviously a pretty vital skill if you're performing on stage or in TV or in a Marvel film. So let's talk about Captain Marvel, and we are gonna spoil the heck out of this movie. You have been warned. Captain Marvel is the story of Carol Danvers, who spends the first half of the film thinking her name is Veers and the Supreme Intelligence has given her special powers, which she is using to protect Kree civilization from the evil-doing Skrulls. Turns out the Kree are kind of genocidal jerks. Veers is actually a human with powers that came from an accident with Kree technology developed by a nice Kree lady who is now dead, and oh hey, I don't have to do what you tell me. I'm gonna help these green people find a home and then I'm gonna come and tell everyone the truth about the supposedly noble heroic war they're fighting. It's a movie where our protagonist is told multiple times that her emotions are getting the better of her. They're getting in the way of her being a great warrior, and she is told this frequently by people whose emotions often get the better of them. Emotions like anger.
This is that moment, Veers. Turn off the light show.
Or indeed, pride.
You do know why they call it a cockpit, don't you?
Because that was the place where the coxswain was. Pride goeth before a fall, man who confidently said things before the existence of Wikipedia. And nobody is more supposedly committed to turning her into a great warrior for the good of all Kree than her mentor, Yon Rogg. He's the Kree Star Force commander, he's Veer's commanding officer, and he's also her friend. Or so we think, if we're unfamiliar with the comics, which I was. Their relationship is friendly and even kind of tender, which makes it quite a shock when it turns out he's actually the kind of person who does a lot of bad things for what he probably thinks are good reasons. And one of the ways we set up this close, bantering, trusting relationship, well, trusting on Carol's part anyway, is with the very first action that she takes in the movie, which is to wake this dude up at don't even think about it o'clock and ask to spar with him. So we establish that he'll answer the door to her at ridiculous o'clock, he's willing to spar with her, she's willing to ask, and he knows about the nightmares.
Dreams again.
And then by the 2-minute 30 mark, punching is happening. This is an action movie after all. We establish in the course of the fight that he's willing to ask her about her nightmares.
Tell me about this dream.
He thinks she should stop dwelling on the past because it makes her vulnerable. He thinks she's too emotional. He's a better fighter than her, but also he's afraid of her powers, which is actually pretty sensible. And on subsequent viewings there are little bits of not quite right which you can spot right at the start. Now, the fighting while talking about your feelings trope is one that I admit is kind of ridiculous, but it's very common in film and I really love it. To be fair, a lot of people, myself included, find it easier to talk about difficult things while doing something else, and since this is an action movie, they're not going to be talking about their feelings while, you know, quilting. So kicking, punching, arm bars and feelings it is. And there's a dual advantage for filmmakers. First, you can slide a fair amount of exposition and character development in to a fight and people won't really notice. Second, fights are choreographed in sections which make them both easier to storyboard and film and also easier to learn. Around here we call these sections phrases, and if you'd like a fuller explanation of what they are and what you can do with them, you should watch my Witcher video. At the end of each phrase, there's a pause in the combat, and you can use this for all kinds of things, including dialogue. And when your characters are speaking, it's only natural that you will cut in closer to their faces, which makes it easier to seamlessly swap between fight performers and the actors in your edit. Brie Larson had 2 stunt doubles on Captain Marvel, and I don't know whether it's one of them or both of them in this scene, but they do good work. So we use this scene to establish that Veers/Carol is pretty good at hand-to-hand combat, but Yon Rogg is definitely better, and that she has a tendency to get frustrated and use her powers. At which point she can beat him easily, which also helps to emphasize how they're deliberately keeping her contained rather than actually letting her fulfill her full potential. Yon Rogg tells her that emotions are a weakness, and he's not exactly correct, because as it turns out emotions can be very helpful to Carol, but he is right that anger can serve your enemy and make you do stupid things, so half a point I guess. That being said, People in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. We use the opportunity of the fight to get Veers and Yon Rogg nicely in and close to each other in a competitive fashion, but not like a dangerous one. Probably neither of them is actually gonna seriously injure the other person, so we use this as well as Carol's initial actions, waking him up to fight, to cement that trust bond that they have. Sharing space on screen in a state of physiological arousal, by which I mean your heart is pounding, you're breathing hard, you're sweating, your pupils are dilated, that kind of thing, especially when no one's actually in danger, is a shortcut to tell you these people are close, because they are, geographically. And it's not a battle to the death, so there's obviously some level of trust there, and we underline it with their banter back and forth and their discussion of the serious issues that are keeping her awake at night, literally. It's pure and good and wholesomely mentory, right? He's concerned about her keeping control. He tells her to let go of her past and that emotions will only serve her opponents, which you would expect from a race of self-declared warrior heroes, and he bests her until she unleashes a photon blast because she's angry about that, which, as he previously mentioned, then requires that she go and see the Supreme Intelligence. Control! You must learn control! It is on the surface conventional. It's expected. They set him up as trusted mentor with every trope that they can chuck in there. He spars with her, he's her commanding officer, he jokes with her, he cares about her, and later on we find out that he saved her life, but it's all a lie. A massive character-shaking deception. Because it's probably true that Yon Rogg thinks he's doing what's best, and that he does feel sorry for and care about Veers, this poor lost soul with her special powers, and he probably thinks that he's acting for the good of all Kree. But he's lying to her. He's lying to her about who she is, where she came from, how she got her powers, the extent of those powers, a lot of very fundamental things. And they hint that something's not quite right in this opening fight, because watch again. We come into the fight with Veers on the ground after Yon Rogg has punched her in the face. She is, like Yon Rogg, rather overconfident and not willing to admit that she makes mistakes, ever. He pushes her about the contents of her nightmares and she attacks him. Now, under usual circumstances, that's pretty typical, but let's watch slowly. He's letting her work out her frustrations on him, but he's not actually letting her land any attacks. He evades or blocks all of them. And then he grabs her by the throat and then dialogue. He's not really trying that hard right now, he's just letting her wear herself out. She responds, gets out of the hold, and goes on the offensive again. And he just lets her go for a bit, but again, when he decides to go on the offensive, he has her in a hold almost immediately. But when we're here, with her arm up behind her head, when he delivers his wise mentor-like advice, he doesn't let her up. He goes on the offensive again, throws her to the ground, and when she instinctively tries to use her powers, he stops her, warns her about the Supreme Intelligence, and only then helps her to her feet. He's already pushed her, she's already close to losing control. He has made his point. They could just stop here. But instead of letting her break the tension by laughing, he goes on the offensive. He pushes her, and he starts to attack. And while she blocks him a number of times and fights back, he is just better than she is. And then he straight up punches her in the face again, and she blasts him out of frustration, which means she now has to go commune with the Supreme Intelligence. Not a fun time. On the first viewing, it's a typical sparring with your mentor kind of match, with the impulsive rookie and the more experienced master telling her to control herself. Master your emotions, and then you will master yourself, and then you can beat me. Second viewing, it's obvious that he's pushing her, and whether that's intentional and he wants her to be checked out by the Supreme Intelligence before they next have a mission, or whether it's accidental, it's still a clue that maybe this guy is not quite as trustworthy as we think he is, and I love it. Now, the other thing that I love that they do is this obvious bookending of Yon Rogg's relationship with Carol. At the beginning, they fight and then she blasts him. By the end, she knows exactly how deeply he has betrayed her trust. And what happens? She blasts him. Same action, right? But what a delicious contrast. Carol starts out impulsive and angry and arrogant, but vulnerable. She photon blasts Yon Rogg out of frustration when she can't beat him hand to hand, and as soon as she does it, the look on her face is guilt, shame, cringe. Oh no, I messed up. And by the rules of the game they are playing, she did. She finishes with enough information to know how she has been lied to and by whom, and to unlock the full extent of her powers to the point that she can single-handedly take on her entire former team just to buy her allies time to escape, and then throw a planet-destroying bomb back into space in order to save the Earth. We start with her smacking him away in a fit of frustration, which leads to her needing to go and commune with the Supreme Intelligence. We end with her blasting him in an act of cool calculation, which ends with him having to go and commune with the Supreme Intelligence. We start with a fight to establish to the audience who this character thinks she is, and we end with an entirely matter-of-fact statement.
I have nothing to prove to you.
Because now she knows. Look at how she's standing. Look at how she's acting. That little... Carol has never been a shrinking violet, but she is utterly confident in herself now. And confident enough not to bother.
This is that moment. This is that moment, Beers. Turn off the light show and prove to me you can beat me without...
And confident enough to offer him her hand, albeit to drag him off to a lifeboat to be sent home in disgrace. And this is more satisfying to me than any sparring match could possibly have been. Because a sparring match is what you expect, right? A sparring match was what I expected the first time I saw this movie. It is so ingrained as a trope that I thought, oh yeah, that's what's going to happen. She's going to fight him hand to hand and she's going to win now because she's learned about herself and things. Nope. We expect that she will take him on in an amazing display of rule-following hand-to-hand combat, which she will win because she's the winner now. You think, or at least I thought, that the bookend was this fight. But no, the bookend is the use of her power. The demands of the plot, which is to say, Yon Rogg is not the ultimate baddie, why would you bother? And just straight up common sense over cinematic convention. And it's genuinely unexpected. And I loved it. She starts off the movie trusting this character so implicitly that she will wake him up at goodness knows what o'clock to spar with her. She ends the movie with people around her that she can actually trust and, frankly, more important things to do than gratify the ego of this dude who is not worth it. So long, Yon Rogg. She is so far above you, you're not even in the same solar system. Hope to see you in the sequel though. So satisfying, especially the first time around when it's a surprise. And then on subsequent viewings, you catch those little moments, starting 2.5 minutes into the movie, which hint that everything isn't quite as you thought it was. So sneaky. But I like it.